Acnologia's return. Acnologia. This name alone represents by far one of the most vicious beings that exists within the entire world of fairy tale, and this man is known to have no mercy whatsoever for anything that stands in his way, and for the most part his motives to do so are completely and utterly unknown up until this point in time. However, when it does come down to it, we have not seen a singular trace of Acnologia since the infamous Universe 1 spell was put into use by e.n.d many chapters ago, and with this lack of presence within the story, many have questioned over this long span of time, where is Acnologia? We've seen everybody else who was affected by Universe 1 for the most part, aside from Acnologia, since Universe 1 was put into place. So we know for a fact that Acnologia is out there somewhere. As for where he is, we don't really know that. But from where we stand within the manga right now, I feel as if Acnologia's return is not only imminent, but also it is approaching us very soon. Not only because we haven't seen a trace of this character in such a long time, but that alongside with the fact that I personally feel as if Acnologia, in the grand scheme of things, is the one true villain of the Alvarez arc. I don't see Zeref to really be the villain type, seeing as in the grand scheme of things, he has done all of what he has done, even though it has been sinful in the grand scheme of things, in the end, just to see his little baby brother once again, who he loves to the extent of no other, Natsu Dragneel. Acnologia's general presence within this arc as well is something that really makes me believe that he's the one true villain of Alvarez. Sure, he's on decent terms with Zeref, however, when it does come down to it, in no way whatsoever is Acnologia on Zeref's side within the war. Much like the Dragon Civil War, Acnologia doesn't have a care in the world who stands in his way as long as he can slay them, and he will slay anybody. This is as well displayed through the way that he killed God Serena. Even though God Serena was on Zeref's side of the war, he didn't even think twice, and he completely annihilated God Serena. Again, this shows that Acnologia may be on decent terms with Zeref, but in no way will that keep him from completing his own agenda. That agenda being, in this instance, to rid of all the Dragon Slayers. With that kind of nature in mind, the nature in which he's a very motive-driven character in the grand scheme of things, and kind of has this aspect to him of doing whatever the fuck he pleases, Acnologia may be on terms with Zeref that are decent, but no way is he on Zeref's side within the war. And if anything, he's much like a third party in terms of the war, a third party that has no interest of working peacefully with the first or second party. And within this war, Acnologia is a very much of a solo force. However, you really could argue that Acnologia doesn't have much of a presence within this war. Therefore, in terms of the war, Fairy Tail's main antagonist would be Zeref. Now, this is very true, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't really believe that Zeref poses as much of a threat in terms of the war as much as Acnologia does. This is as well coupled with the fact that Zeref hasn't really been much of a threat as long as Acnologia has. Now, Acnologia has really been a threat since the Dragon Civil War, where he had no mercy towards humans nor dragons and slayed each side ruthlessly for reasons that are still unknown up until this point. Acnologia really entered the picture more back during Tenro, when he had his first encounter with Fairy Tail and was overall the cause of the 7-year time skip when it does come down to it, but even then, he wasn't much of a large presence in terms of villains of Fairy Tail. He really made his presence known when he appeared during Tartarus, though, and slayed Igneel. In terms of the war, though, with Acnologia's absence, he hasn't really been much of a threat as of lately, but whenever he does return, not only will he be one pissed off motherfucker, he will as well most likely occupy the position of #1 threat towards both Fairy Tail and the Alvarez Empire. But then again, we don't really know exactly where Acnologia is, and we haven't since e.n.d utilized the lost magic of Universe 1, which rearranged Fury entirely. Now, with the whole fight between Urza and e.n.d heating up more and more by every single chapter, and the feeling that we're approaching the end of the fight, and quite possibly the end of e.n.d as a character growing more and more, I, along with many, feel as if we're going to see Acnologia return very soon. Especially because now, with e.n.d being in her dragon form, if we were to see Acnologia return, we could, I guess, see more of a formal fight than what we saw prior, a fight that's basically dragon versus dragon, kind of what Igneel versus Acnologia was. Now, there's really two ways I see Acnologia's return taking place. Either A, he returns prior to the end of e.n.d and Urza fighting and essentially interrupts it, and there's no really, just, I guess, in-depth reasoning as to why Acnologia has been gone for so long and what he's been doing. Or the e.n.d versus Urza fight concludes with Urza beating e.n.d somehow. The how is what I'm not too sure about, and the effects of the lost spell of Universe 1 revert, and we essentially see everyone return to where they were prior to the Universe 1 taking effect. Now, when it does come down to it, I'm not exactly too sure how likely this is. It could definitely be considered a long shot and a shot in the dark, if you will, but what I am sure of is that this would in return cause Acnologia to be back in action, seeing as he'd be sent to where he was prior to Universe 1, and that was standing in front of Eileen. However, from there, the question then becomes, what will Acnologia do from that point on, and how will his presence affect the remainder of this war and this arc as a whole? Well, knowing Acnologia to be this heavily motive-driven character in the grand scheme of things, and as well keeping in mind the fact that he has an agenda to attend to, that being to slay the remaining 7 Dragon Slayers, it's likely that we could see him just do that. And this is where I believe that things could really go south in terms of Fairy Tail's placement within this war, seeing as if Acnologia is to make a reappearance, and if he is to resume his goal of slaying the remaining Dragon Slayers, it's likely that it will be very easy for him to complete this, seeing as a good majority of the Dragon Slayers are currently out of action, aside from characters such as Gajeel and Loxus, I believe. So yeah, unless Loxus and Gajeel have plans to beat Acnologia on their own without any help, which will most likely not end well for them in the slightest, yeah, this will cause a lot of problems for Fairy Tail in the grand scheme of things, and it will shake up this war a lot. Going back as well real quickly to all of Acnologia's appearances within Fairy Tail, there's one common thing that takes place during every single time, and that is the fact that we've only ever seen Acnologia appear, aside from Alvarez, whenever Natsu doesn't have his scarf on. In general, this is like the community to actually have a theory that when Natsu's scarf isn't on his body, Acnologia can locate Natsu and show up to wreak havoc. This theory would really make sense, seeing as Anna made Natsu's scarf, and it's possible that her real purpose behind making the scarf was to allow for Natsu to grow attached to it at a young age, so that he would wear it, and in return, so that Acnologia wouldn't be able to locate and kill Natsu at a very young age. We as well know that Acnologia is scared of e.n.d, who in the grand scheme of things is Natsu. So when Natsu was younger, the scarf could have acted as a repellent for Acnologia succeeding in slaying e.n.d. At this current point in time as well, with all that's going on in regards to Natsu's character, and with Porolosia unable to really pinpoint the issue with Natsu right now, that being the tumor that is e.n.d, they actually took off Natsu's scarf. Now, if this theory proves to be true, then it's possible, and at the same time, it's highly likely that Acnologia will be capable of locating Natsu, and from there, he could take advantage of the situation that Natsu is currently in. However, I doubt that Natsu will die to do this. Maybe we could actually possibly see e.n.d come out of this as a defense to Acnologia while Natsu is in the state that he's currently in. Who really knows? When it comes to the case of Natsu as well, he may even be put into more danger in the case that the Universe 1 reversion theory, or whatever the hell you want to call it, comes to fruition, seeing as he'd inevitably be placed near August along with Lucy, Happy, and Brandish. As for Wendy, she's really been put through the ringer throughout the entirety of this arc, especially for someone of her age. In the case that Acnologia does interrupt the Eileen versus Urza fight, for starters, I do believe that Acnologia could go on to kill Eileen. It's very, very possible, especially because she's the person who utilized Universe 1 and caused this whole mess to begin with. However, the fight will most likely be drawn out for a very long time, much like Igneel versus Acnologia was, seeing as they will both be dragons most likely. But afterwards, with the whole meteor thing going on right now, I highly doubt that even Urza would be able to put up a fight against Acnologia if Eileen is beaten. When Eileen is beaten, not even if, because Acnologia will tear through her like, you know, just paper basically. Maybe Eileen could sacrifice herself for the well-being of Urza and Wendy, but then again, it's doubtful that Urza will even have the strength to carry herself along with Wendy out of the battlefield. So, as much as it's hard to say with all the Aspel deaths that we've seen throughout the entirety of Alvarez, it is possible that Wendy could actually be taken out if Acnologia were to return in this fashion. Not saying that her death is inevitable by any means whatsoever, because again, so many Aspels throughout the entirety of this arc, just pointing out though, a possibility if Acnologia is to intervene within the fight. However, if Universe 1's effects on the terrain are in fact reverted, then it's likely that Wendy could find refuge along with Urza. Originally, they were actually near Gray and Juvia, who may be quite out of it at this current point in time. However, Urza and Wendy are much worse off, so they could actually help out quite a bit, but again, with that theory, I'm not too sure how likely it is. Another 2 Dragon Slayers who are, I guess, really just not faring well at this current point in time, I guess you could say, is Sting and Rogue. Now, Sting, utilizing both his own magic power and the remainder of Rogue's, did take on Larcade, and they were successful. However, their success did come at the expense of their ability to perform in the war. So, in the case Acnologia does intervene proving in the fight with Eileen and Urza, they may fare relatively well for a while as they're out of the battle and whatnot, but it's almost inevitable that Acnologia will either A, come across them, or B, track them down entirely if he isn't put to a stop by someone else. And with their condition, much like Wendy, I think they'd basically be screwed. However, going back to the Universe 1 theory again, if we see the landscape actually reverted back to its original size and whatnot, they may be able to find help from someone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that prior to Universe 1's effects, Sting and Rogue were actually paired up with the Straw siblings, so they could be of some help. When it does come down to it, the two Dragon Slayers that would probably be the best off in the case of Acnologia's return would most likely be Gaziel and Loxus. Now, best off in the sense that they'd be able to defend themselves, but that defense would most likely fall through, let's be honest here, seeing as I don't believe that their combined power would be enough to match Acnologia. The ideal setup for a fight countering Acnologia would probably be all the Dragon Slayers in their prime in regards to their health and whatnot, which is not what we have right now, and maybe even throwing in a couple other powerful characters in the mix and whatnot. So, with the immense power that Acnologia has in mind, I'm not exactly too sure how well they'd be off. Now, something that actually could happen if the Universe 1 effects are to be reversed is that we could also see Gaziel's escape from death to be reversed as well. Now, I'm not exactly too sure how likely this will be when it does come down to it, seeing as I don't really know how he survived to begin with. All I really know is I was somehow attached to Universe 1, but that's still a possible outcome in my personal opinion. But in the grand scheme of things, Acnologia's return is something that is really hyped up for a lot and for a very, very good reason. That reason being because of the pure fact that his return will really shake up the war and this arc as a whole. Nevertheless, what do you guys think? Do you guys believe that Acnologia's return could take place and turn the tides of this war and this arc as a whole? Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new and you want to see some more fairy tale content from me. Peace.